The Central Valley of California is a flat, elongated stretch of land about 450 miles long that runs from northeast to southeast down the center of the state. Often called the breadbasket of the world, it's thought to be mostly farms and agriculture, but there are many towns and cities here that are home to nearly 7 million people. Not a lot of money in these parts. Drug use is rampant and the homicide rate is off the charts. Here are some of their stories. This is Murder in the Central Valley. This week's episode, Murder is Afoot. Our story takes place in Lodi, a small town about 30 miles south of Sacramento. Some of the world's best grapes are grown right here. Lodi boasts about 100 wineries that rival Napa to the northwest. Crime has always been low, even being right next door to Stockton, one of the most violent cities in the country. On August 1st, 2018, 67-year-old Thomas Schock was settling down for the evening. His wife, of 45 years, had gone upstairs and fell asleep listening to a podcast. Around 10 p.m. there was a knock at the door. 3 shots were fired. Thomas falls in his doorway. A piece of paper is tossed next to him. A blacked-out car speeds off into the night. Thomas Schock, husband, dad, grandfather, and pillar of the community, lay dead. But why? The answer to that later. So who was Tom Schock? Let's rewind the clock to happier times. Thomas Grant Schock was born in 1950. He grew up in the Bay Area. After graduating from high school, he went to college at the University of the Pacific in Stockton. There, one day he met a girl playing frisbee on the lawn. Her name was Nancy. She would later become his wife. This was the 1970s, and their life was the picture of success. Tom and Nancy moved all up and down the state as they worked their way through their young life. They welcomed their first son into the world around the same time Tom decided to go to pre-med school. He worked as a carpenter to pay for tuition. He eventually studied podiatry and became Dr. Thomas Schock, a surgeon that specialized in ankles and feet. His dreams came true in 1985 when he opened Lodi Podiatry. As his family grew, so did his business. He opened offices in Stockton and Jackson. Tom loved being a podiatrist, his practice, and his life. He spent 25 years in the Rotary in Lodi and even 1 year as the president. When he wasn't working, he was cycling long distances and hiking. He also enjoyed travel. In fact, he and Nancy had just returned from a trip to Europe. With his clean living and hard work, who would have ever thought his life would end in a hail of bullets on a summer's night? It would seem like it would be hard to track down a killer when a person doesn't seem to have any enemies. Nancy was questioned. She talked about the events of that day. Tom was working with 2 high school students on some rental properties. He came home to spend some time with their grandkid, then off to a nice dinner. Afterwards, a quiet evening on their back patio. Nancy didn't even hear the gunfire. Neighbors heard 3 shots and called police. When they arrived, they found Dr. Schock with gunshot wounds to the arm, chest, and head. Officers tried life-saving measures, but it was too late. The clue the killers left was so telling that it led police right to them. That single sheet of paper that was deliberately left at the scene. It wasn't just any sheet of paper. It was a page from a medical board document. The rest of the pages were missing. It was a complaint from someone with the initials BL. In Tom's 33 years as a podiatrist, he only had one dust-up. That was with a patient by the name of Bonnie Lee. In January of 2011, the 68-year-old woman went to Dr. Schock's office complaining of soreness and redness of her right great toe. She was treated for an ingrown toenail. In November, she came back with a painful ingrown toenail on her left great toe. It was badly infected and had to be lanced. Between 2011 and 2012, Miss Lee went to Dr. Schock's office some 13 times with a painfully infected toe. She was prescribed antibiotics. Cultures were taken. She even had to go back every day to get injections for pain. In February of 2012, they had to amputate the toe. In the complaint, the amputation site was not healing well and got infected. Finally, in March of 2012, they had to remove half her left foot. In 2014, the Lees, Bonnie, and husband Robert filed a malpractice suit against Dr. Shock. They claimed gross negligence. In 2016, Shock was disciplined by the medical board in the case involving her treatment. Just months after the discipline was handed down, Bonnie Lee, mother of 2 and grandmother of 6, died of an infection at age 73. Robert was devastated by his wife's death and blamed Dr. Shock. No one can say for certain if Bonnie's death was from poor treatment, but it being 2 years after the fact, it's unlikely. Either way, Robert blamed Tom for killing his wife of 56 years. Dr. Shock continued to practice until he retired in June of 2018. He and Nancy took a trip to Europe. They had just returned days before his murder. Investigators sent the piece of paper to the lab for testing. In the meantime, cops went to Tom's old office to see if they could identify BL. Of course, we now know it was Bonnie Lee. Robert became suspect number 1. The lab found a single thumbprint on the paper left at the scene. The print came back to 26-year-old Christopher Costello. They also obtained the IP addresses of who downloaded the multi-page document. It turned out Robert Lee did. They served a search warrant on Robert's house. They found the remaining pages of the document, 7 cell phones, a computer, and multiple firearms, but a .38 caliber handgun was missing. This missing gun used in the murder was believed to be with Costello. The two had no known ties. Before the murder, Robert took a $5,000 loan either at the end of July or the 1st of August. He told investigators that he gave $3,500 to his daughter and used $1,500 for groceries and bills. A longtime friend of Robert Lee who contacted police after the killing said that Lee blamed Shock for his wife's death. Lee and Costello were arrested for murder. Also taken into custody, 27-year-old Mallory Stewart, who was the gunman, and 26-year-old Raymond Jacket IV, the getaway driver. All 4 men stood trial separately. Mallory Stewart, the gunman, pled guilty to first-degree murder with a weapons enhancement. He received life in prison and isn't eligible for parole until 2052. Christopher Costello was found guilty of first-degree murder and got life without parole. Raymond Jacket, the driver, was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life. And the mastermind, Robert Elmo Lee, was found guilty of first-degree murder, lying in wait, and murder for financial gain. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. In the end, there are no winners. An innocent man is dead and 4 men are locked up. And life in livable, lovable Lodi goes on. If you've enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching Murder in the Central Valley.